what we wanted to do is just maybe tell you a little bit about what you just saw with Hanane, and then answer any questions that you might have. So the first thing we wanted to do is to ask Hanane, when she picks up her breath again, to tell us a little bit about whacking. And then from there, we'll get into some of the panels and some of the musical choices, thank you, that Hanane has done. So let's start with your artistic practice as a whacker.
Yes. First of all, hi. My name is Hanane Soltani. It's known as Sultana. So this was happy. I tried to kind of like have my own vision on these kind of creations from whacking, of course. And since whacking, it's like it started in like the gay clubs in the 70s. It's kind of like a style, as like self-expression, performance, you know, like celebration. It was invented because of oppression, because these people weren't allowed to, you know, celebrate and dance at the normal clubs. So whacking was created to, you know, be free or whatever. And it's kind of like how I took, the crack with truth.
Yeah. So this panel is called, let me just tell them maybe a little bit about the panel.
Yeah.
So this panel is actually, Soukaina is the artist with whom all of this has taken place. So let's make sure that we all... So Soukaina and I have been collaborating for a few months, and from the research around specifically radio and the role of radio in independence movements across the continent, we came up with this idea of crackling truths. So it's the kind of truth that comes up when you're kind of looking for maybe a pirate radio station, you kind of make out bits and pieces and it kind of fades out. And so the idea was for us to start thinking about these crackling truths that you can only hear, that sometimes get censored, which is what these panels are really all about, this idea of silence as a motif. So when you start to hear a truth, all of a sudden it gets cut. And so the idea with crackling truths, and actually Hanane has a belt, which is right there, which is her truth, that she actually dropped on that silence as she was finishing her piece, is really about those messages that were able to come out and the communities that were built through sound from these radios. And so I've done some research on this in Egypt, in Ghana, in Angola. I didn't do the research in Angola, but I've been looking into the work that's been done in Angola. But across the continent, radio was used as a way to gather people around causes that seemed important to them at the time, which was primarily liberation. So Soukaina interpreted some of that research into the panel that you see here. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. As I said, the performance, the hand feed, it's mainly inspired by the hand. It's a Czech Republic film. It's basically this kind of puppet. He's trying to make his own flower pot, but there's this hand that's forcing him to make like a giant hand out of pottery and stuff. And yeah, it's basically telling you that you can't just do whatever you want. As an artist, there are things that you can't just do. So the hand is the bad guy. Stop, what are you doing? But yeah, that's the main idea. I think we're gonna have that displayed
right
later.
There. So when we finish this conversation, there will be a projection of the hand. It's a very short film of about 20 minutes or so. It's an animation film, one of the first animation films. And as Hanane was just saying, it's the story of a little potter who all he wants to do is make pots. And somebody's telling him not to do that. It's quite powerful. The sound that you were hearing Hanane dancing to is the soundtrack of that film. So you'll get a sense for some of the references, sonic references that Hanane was working with when you watch the film. So it was made in 1965, and the reason why this film is in this research to begin with, why a Czech film, that sounds a bit odd, but Ferit Bilkahia, who is one of the artists that founded the School of Casablanca, studied in the Czech Republic and met Jiří Trnka, who is the director of this film, while he was in Prague, and was very much influenced by him. And Bilkahia actually studied theater set design. That was what he actually majored in, if you want to call it that, when he was in the Czech Republic. And so this gentleman was a puppeteer, and so he created particularly interesting set designs. So if you have a chance, stay so that you can actually watch this film.
Yes. And I also kind of like took inspiration from three songs, Independence Cha-Cha and Canal Hine Mali. It's kind of like bringing up the idea of like bringing the Pan-African like kind of idea of like a united Africa back in 1960. So I tried to like, you know, this is our independence, but at the same time, the hand is always there, you know. It's always going to be there. I mean, look at what's happening around the world. You know, the hand is, you could do whatever you want to do, I'm sorry, but we're human, so it's a powerful subject, but yeah, it's kind of like calling for independence, but at the same time, what are we doing?
Yeah. So Independence Cha-Cha is a Congolese song. It's c'est de la rumba, donc Congolese rumba. And what's interesting is that Le Grand Calais, who is the artist who sings that song, actually went with a whole delegation of Congolese leaders to Brussels to actually negotiate the independence from Belgium at the time. And so the song was first sang actually in Brussels. So this is an example of music that actually accompanies the independence movement in a quite literal way. They actually were with them in Brussels while this was all happening. Gana Gini Mali is a song by Iti Mensa. Iti Mensa is the king of high life from Accra as well in Ghana. And he sang this song about a union, a Pan-African union that was created between first Ghana and Guinea in 58, and then Mali was added to it in 61. And the reason this is important is because Casablanca hosted in the early parts in January of 1961, a Pan-African conference, a very important one, that took place here with all of these countries, right here in Morocco, and Mohamed V hosted it.
Yes.
Voila.
And also this kind of last image, it's kind of like my practical truth that I made, which made me grounded a lot. It's hard.
She wove it
Yes.
herself.
It's hard. This is, I mean, thanks to you for making this. It's crazy. I don't know how you did it, but it's challenging. And it's kind of like the harsh kind of truth. This is like being silenced. So I'm just going to be like, this is my truth. I don't care. Even though I'm going to be silenced, there you have it. You do whatever you want to do with it. That's it.
And she kind of punctuated the piece with one last musical selection, which is by Rass El Khait. I think you guys probably recognized it. So it's from a film called Sarumjan. It's an album and a film. I think a lot of people, and I'm going to just see a show of hands, have probably seen Trans by Ahmed El-Manoury. So this is a film that was made before, about 2 years before, in 1979. And it's not a documentary about Rass El Khait. It's Rass El Khait themselves kind of traveling across Morocco on a bit of a spiritual and sort of traditional quest. And so there's not a clear storyline, but the soundtrack is amazing, and Sarumja is the title track that Hanane chose. And Rass El Khait, in our opinion, and it's something that Soukaina has spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about, was for us perhaps the sound school that really made a difference in the late 60s when they first started performing as a theater troupe, and then into the 70s. And so this idea that Rass El Khait created a school that then has created over 2,500 groups that have followed behind them is something that we find pretty powerful as a statement about the way that sound can actually do things differently than visual work or than things that have been written. So that's one of the things that we've been thinking about.
Yes. And I also want to say thank you, and thank you for inviting me to work with this.
To play, yeah.
So much fun. It was stressful with them, but no, it was so much fun. Thank you. So,
wanted to see if anybody had any questions or comments or thoughts or concerns, or go for it.
I have a question because looking at the phrase that there's something
yeah.
Very good question. So I actually have the text here, and it's normal that you couldn't read because it's actually a transliteration from Arabic. The text is in French, but we actually transliterated in Arabic. There's a wonderful artist, a calligraphy artist by the name of Wafa, who actually worked on all of the frames that you see here. On the side, you have her work, and those are extracts from the text that we were working on as we were doing our research. So I will read you, if I can find it, hold on, that particular text. Actually, I don't have it here, hold on. I will be right back. I have it in my bag. So it's by a young woman named Saïda Nahbi, who was an English teacher in Rabat in the 70s. She was part of a union called l'Union Nationale des Étudiants Marocains, an activist who unfortunately was arrested and taken to jail. And so these are her poems that she wrote while she was there, and there is a beautiful book that was created of all of that poetry. And the reason this is important in the context of what we're talking about is because as well, Abdeltif Labi, does that name ring a bell? Yeah, he was a poet, he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine called Suivi. So Abdeltif Labi was also in jail at the same time. When he came out, he wrote a book about Saïda al-Nahbi for children, and it was called Saïda et les voleurs de soleil. So if you have a chance, take a look at that. But let me read you Saïda's poem in her own words. So this is an extract. It says, Je suis communiste. Ma persévérance, la tienne, celle de tous, dans le sang nous l'avons, du peuple nous la tenons. D'Abdelkrim, héros des montagnes, de Zerouel, martyr inoubliable. Cet homme qu'ils ont tué mais qui ne pourra jamais être oublié. Cet homme dont le cœur n'a pas connu la peur. Donc that is one of her poems, but if you have a chance, I would definitely recommend looking at both Labi's book about her, but then also her own poetry, which is really quite beautiful. It's love poems to her boyfriend. It's poetry for her nephew and her niece, to her parents, letters, very, very moving work. So I highly recommend it. Thank you for the question. Any other thoughts or questions? For Soukaina, maybe. Yes. Donc le titre. The title of the piece is Losing Rass El Khait. Losing Rass El Khait means, you know in Arabic, I don't need to explain it, but it's a theater set designed for radical rehearsal. So the idea is really for us to work with artists, and all of these are just tools in a box. They pick the ones that they like. So Zakaria last week had very different panels, then Hanane and Shakib is choosing other ones, and they're in dialogue with the research, they're in dialogue with the actual panels themselves, the sounds of the period, and together they're creating something to actually present to you, and it's something that moves them. Yeah. So all we're providing is just a set of tools, and then they do what they will with them.
And should these set of tools inspire any of you, and you guys want to play around with it?
You are welcome to.
Just let us know. Might be able to
Yeah. Yes. Salam.
How can I process the collaboration?
Ouais. Alors, donc,
Can you repeat the question?
en anglais. Yeah. He was wondering what is the collaboration process between the sort of the work that Soukaina have been doing and I have been doing, and then how we invited Hanane. And maybe Hanane, you want to speak about this?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So they invited me to discover, these creations, and these kind of spoke to me a lot, and I asked, of course, what's behind every one of them. So I kind of just went ahead to see what's the crafting truth about me, and also what's happening around the world, for sure. And it's just it's like a research and a conversations, what do you think of this, or what's your opinion on this matter, for example, putting this on the silence, or that was kind of the process a little bit. I don't know if I answered your question a little bit.
Yeah. The other thing that was important was, and I think maybe Hanane, that's why you chose the hand, is we sent a bit of a playlist, right?
Yeah.
Here are the sounds that Soukaina and I have been thinking with and working around for the last few months. And so as they were listening to the different sounds, different things, resonated. And so and for me, sound isn't just music, right? It's not just a song that you play. It's a soundtrack. Last week, for example, Zakaria chose poetry. So somebody reading poetry, Mohamed Khairuddin, on an actual radio broadcast, right? That was taking place in France at the time. So the idea is to kind of pick just a thread, one thread that you can then pull. So Zakaria pulled the thread of Mohamed Khairuddin and his exile and the work that he was doing there. Hanane pulled the soundtrack of the hand.
Yeah.
And that was the leading sort of work that she then, played out in various ways, and then chose other songs that she interspersed because they talked about sort of Pan-Africanism in general.
Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing?
Of course.
I thought the collaboration between the three there was a very, very set, linear kind of timeline of how it happened. Where Amina started her research, then invited me to respond to it, and then together we came up with this toolbox. Plus, we decided then to invite others to. يقطع الموزك راس الخيط باش ما يتلفش يهدانا. The hope as well as that this is then passed on to you guys في الحدة اللي بدينا لكم راس الخيط. وإذا شي حاجة بدات لكم شي حاجة شي بلاصة كملوا مع ذاك راس الخيط وبدات لكم ما
Exactly, and the idea is that at the time we had so many different artists, so many different activists, so many different musicians who had Rass El Khait, and sadly, in many cases, they were made to lose Rass El Khait. So how do we go back and pull a few of those in various ways? So that's the idea. Anybody else? يلا دوروا les chaises. Merci.